Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums. Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi.
Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, and animal conservation. And we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, so we're going to get right into it here. To start with, I posted about this yesterday, if you're listening on the Friday this came out. But in case you didn't see it, I got to have a very small hand in getting a new bit of merch created for the Virginia Zoo this week, and I'm really excited about it, so I kind of wanted to share the story. So it all started when I visited the Virginia Zoo recently. We will have an episode coming out from there that I think you're going to love. And one of the things that really stood out to me at the zoo was the fact that the gift shop worked with a lot of local artists. And each of the displays for each artist had signage about the artist and about kind of who they are and the art that they do. And the art was related to zoo stuff. And it was just very cool and a very unique thing. I would love to see more zoos connect with their local artisan community that way. It's just really cool. And so one of the artists stood out to me because, as y'all know, I love stuffed animals. And there was a crocheted stuffed red panda. And I thought it was just the cutest thing. And so I jotted down who the artist was and followed her on Instagram, and they're called Tied in Knots Crocheting. And I was just like I said, I was just so impressed. And it turns out that both her and her daughter are special needs and do this art, and it's just a cool story. I'm a big fan of both of them now, and so that was step one in this process. Now, step two is I have always loved the binturong habitat at the Virginia Zoo. And I mean love. It's an incredible habitat. And the binturong that lives there is named Tosic, and he is just an old grumpy man, which is adorable. He is the scruffiest binturong, and I love him so much. And my daily post yesterday is about him, as well as what I'm talking about now. And so when I started talking to Tied in Knots, I was like, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know Tosic the binturong that is at the zoo, but I think that Tosic would make a great project for you. And I, would assume that the zoo would want to have those to sell as well. So I sent her my pictures that I had taken of Tosic, and she used them as reference photos, and has now created a crocheted binturong that is absolutely gorgeous. And it's like large and cool, and just, I'm a huge fan. And it turns out I was right. She sent pictures to the Virginia Zoo's buyer, and they absolutely loved it. And so now you're going to be able to get your own stuffed binturongs at the Virginia Zoo, which makes me really happy. But of course, you can also get them on the online by going to tied_in_knots_crocheting and following along, or going to tied-in-knots-crocheting.square.site. I'll put those in the show notes. And you can get the binturong and the red panda and sea turtles, and I think they have sloths and all kind of other animals and also other cool stuff. But this is a great artist to support, and the fact that this is like a fun little collaboration, Rossifari inspired, makes me really happy. There are going to be people that have binturong stuffies just because we did this thing, and that's really cool. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And actually, I'm even more excited about it because literally, so this happened on Thursday, October 24th, the day that I'm recording this. And on the same day, Miles called me after I did all this. And he told me that every year they have to do a report on an animal starting in the third grade. And so last year he did red pandas, obviously. And so this year he decided that he's doing a report on binturongs for school. And so that makes me really, really proud. And I got him one of these binturongs as a little surprise for taking on that project. So yeah, that one is really fun. Okay, so moving on from that, had a super proud moment this week as Zoe has started volunteering at Aquarium of Niagara. She's actually doing some volunteer veterinary work there to get more exotics experience as she works towards becoming a zoo or aquarium vet. So it was so fun. We were there hanging out after she had finished her first shift, and someone asked, "Do you two work here?" And we said in unison, "We volunteer here." And it was just a really cool moment. Also, she and the vet tech there, Julie, did a necropsy of a little fish, and I got to observe it. It was pretty fascinating and a lot different than the first necropsy I got to witness, which was a wildebeest and significantly larger and more complex. I like being in the necropsy room. And I know that might sound super crazy or something, but it's actually fascinating both to see what's going on inside an animal and like how they work and such, and also to watch veterinarians and vet techs and such basically just look at a bunch of stuff that all look surprisingly similar to all the other things in there and like identify them and point out issues with them and basically just do all the cool stuff that they do. I would actually love to be in the room for more necropsies. And, you know, one thing that stands out to me in the two that I've been in is how much love and respect the animals are treated with. Like, yes, there is obviously the cutting and removing of bits and analyzing them that is very, we'll say, intimate. And that's there. But it's all done with respect and with a genuine compassion and honestly with the true hope to be able to explain the death if the reason is unknown, or just to learn and advance science, whether the cause of death is known or not. So, you know, I think that to me, death is a lot less scary when it's seen in that light. And honestly, as a person who's had my fair share of loss in the last few years, that's nice. I like it. So I'm thankful to all the vets, techs, pathologists, and other people who do this part of the work. You know, seeing it in person has only increased my love and admiration for the people in those professions. And one final fun story before we get to the actual reason you're here. I've recently started saying the word zoo instead of other places, like completely by accident. I'm not doing this to be cute. Like I'll be talking to someone and I'll say something like, "Hey, let's meet at the zoo for coffee," when I mean to insert the name of a coffee shop in there, not zoo. You know, I have to go to the zoo to cash my check. Bank. I mean, bank. Stuff like that. It's like a almost a Freudian slip. Instead of being sensual, though, it's sensual, I guess. But that's my life now. Anyway. Time for Zoo News. Time for Zoo News. All right, so we're going to start off with a headline story that's a bit of a personal one. Y'all know I've spent time at Buttonwood Park Zoo drumming with Emily the elephant. And Emily lives at the zoo along with another wonderful, though less percussively inclined elephant named Ruth, who you heard all about on the Drumming with Elephants episode. Well, the zoo announced this week that Ruth is officially entering hospice care, meaning that she will soon be gone. And while I didn't get to know Ruth as closely as I did Emily, I can attest to the fact that she is an absolute gem. Her relationship with her keepers is incredibly strong, and even though her and Emily didn't always have the best relationship, as they have aged, they have sought each other's space out a little bit more, which is really sweet. But what makes this more than just a normal announcement is that it yet again illustrates how the internet has some people that just can't help themselves when it comes to comments and aggression online. And I will say this, the vast majority of the comments I've seen have been loving or at the very least respectful, sending love or sharing their sorrow and memories of Ruth and such. But some of the people feel this is a great time to go off on the fact that Emily and Ruth haven't been moved to an elephant sanctuary, or to share their belief that the animals are not well taken care of, or whatever. And I just don't get it. Do these people truly not understand that there are people on the other side of, Facebook and Instagram and stuff? People who actually care about and love these animals? I'm surprised this hasn't happened before, honestly, but I got into it with the leader of a group known as the Friends of Ruth and Emily on Facebook over their comments. Now, this is a group that has existed for a while that hates all zoos, that's their words, and people from it will literally go to the zoo and verbally attack keepers or try to tell guests that the zoo is evil and they are mistreating Emily and Ruth. Now, I learned about these people when I first went to drum with Emily because some of the staff there was worried that someone from the group would show up and ruin the experience, but it has not happened when I've been there, which is nice, in part because I'm very defensive when it comes to not me, but people and animals I love, so I don't know how well I would have been able to be chill. But yeah, I'm honestly surprised that with all the viral stuff I've had happen with Emily, that I haven't clashed with this group before now. But I kind of attribute that to them not actually being particularly vigilant or good at what they do, to be honest. That's my take, but that is my take. And the argument that we had briefly online certainly leads credence to that belief. And the thing is, I don't actually have a problem with people thinking that elephants shouldn't be in zoos or whatever. I disagree, but that's fine. I disagree with a lot of people about things, and I'm able to have civil conversations and even learn from their point of view and hopefully have them learn from mine. I've talked about it on here before, but I'm regularly pleasantly surprised at how often nasty comments on social media turn to fruitful discussions as I talk about zoos and conservation and stuff. But when people use gross tactics and try to hurt people over their disagreements, then, in my opinion, they lose the right to civility because they're not being civil. I know the people who care for Ruth and Emily. I've been behind the scenes with them and inches from them as they interact with their animals. I've watched the passion and expertise they have for these two girls, and I've seen how much the girls love them and light up when they are around them. I've seen it firsthand, I've also talked to independent experts about the situation the two girls are in, and those experts believe it is in their best interest to stay at the zoo for a variety of reasons. And now Ruth is going to be leaving us soon. And the zoo has announced that Emily will be staying at the zoo as a solo elephant. Which, to be clear, I know that is something that the AZA usually does not allow, and is also not something I'm normally a fan of. But I know Emily, and I know her personality, and I know how poorly she has done with other elephants in the past, so I actually think this is probably an example of, the welfare of an individual being considered over just saying, oh, this is what a species needs, because that's what people who care for individual animals need to do, right? So yeah, I'm not gonna lie though, I'm scared. I'm scared for what the zoo is going to face when they already have protesters and misinformed people who will now have a solo elephant to, in their minds, try to save. I'm scared for the keepers who are going to have to face the same attacks, if not more amplified ones now, all while saying goodbye to an animal they love with their whole hearts. And I'm not going to lie, while I do believe it is in the best interest of Emily to stay at the zoo, I do worry about her being a solo elephant because they are a social species, and even if all indications are that it is in her best interest, the truth is it's not like she can use her words to tell us that's what she wants. which is why at the end of the day, I trust the experts and I trust the people who care for her. And I know the people there well enough to know they are doing what they believe is in her best interest. And I am sure they are right. And unlike other people, they are doing that in a way that considers the welfare of all involved and aren't losing their own humanity in the service of their mission, which I fear I don't personally believe is true of the other side. And this is going to be an interesting time for that zoo, and I'm here to support them, and I know y'all are as well. And it's going to be tough to say goodbye to Ruth. And the other thing that I've learned from all of this is that when this announcement comes down for Emily, I am not going to be okay. So I'm actually really glad I'm figuring that out now and can kind of gird my loins about it. That elephant has meant the world to me. And even just thinking of Ruth, just the other one in the other woman in my life up there, leaving the world is painful for me. But yeah, I'm not looking forward to that one. All right. Well, that was our headline story. And sorry, it got kind of melancholy, but, we try to be real on here. But hey, that brings us to our births for the week. And we only have a couple. I figured we're gonna shift the tone a little bit here because I figured we were done with red panda births for the year, but I was wrong. The Exmoor Zoo has announced that 2 baby red pandas were born there this summer. Shifumi and Pan are the parents, and they gave birth to twin female pandlets this summer. The zoo just now announced the births, even though the cubs are already big enough that they're out running around on their habitat with mom. I've actually had people reach out and say that they saw them, which is kind of cool. These are the first cubs born to the pair, and mom has done a great job with them from the start. So, pretty awesome to get to report that, at the end of October. Altina Wildlife Park in Australia has welcomed 2 maned wolf pups to the family, named Muchacho, which means little man, and Anahi, which means both beautiful like a flower and immortal. Pretty cool juxtaposition of names there. Both pups are from a very important genetic matchup, so represent a huge hope for the species. Muchacho is boisterous and confident, constantly wrestling and playing. And Anahi started off pretty intolerant to Muchacho's play, but as she has grown up during her first few weeks of life, her playful side has been brought out by her brother, which I think is adorable. The Potawatomi Zoo is officially home to a new female Maasai giraffe calf. Born to mom Zinzi, the little one is healthy and doing very well. Zinzi actually arrived to the Potawatomi Zoo pregnant, so the dad isn't part of the herd there, which is pretty interesting and kind of cool. So congrats to the Potawatomi Zoo, which is possibly my favorite zoo name to say. And then last in births this week, the Sydney Zoo has announced the birth of 4 meerkat pups, or meerlets. These little ones join an already large mob that is thriving, so congrats to the Sydney Zoo. And then, of course, that brings us to the other side and the deaths for the week. And it starts off with a tough one. It is time to say goodbye to another Matschie's tree kangaroo. The Santa Fe Teaching Zoo in Florida has announced the passing of Eki, the male tree kangaroo that called the zoo home. It turns out that Eki had a deflated heart, which made it hard for the organ to pump enough blood for him to meet his bodily needs. He leaves behind his mate Adelaide and their new Joey, who has just started poking out of mom's pouch. Eki was an absolutely beautiful tree kangaroo and will be greatly missed. And that wasn't the only loss suffered by the Santa Fe Teaching Zoo recently. Amanda, the yellow-crowned Amazon, seemed to be having problems with her air sac, and sadly, she passed away under anesthesia while they were trying to figure out what was going on. Necropsy results showed an aggressive tumor that was the cause of her issues. Amanda was 32 years old, and as such had been cared for by, and helped to educate, literally hundreds of student keepers in her time. Keep in mind that both of these losses took place while dealing with the aftermath of one hurricane and preparing for another one. So talk about a challenging time for everyone at the Santa Fe Teaching Zoo. Sending all my love to the team there. Moonlit Sanctuary Wildlife Conservation Park has said goodbye to Gumnut the koala. Turns out that Gumnut had an underlying chronic condition that recently reared its ugly head and ended up being bad enough that the decision was made to euthanize. Gumnut was one of the most popular koalas at the park, in large part because she was almost always willing to volunteer for guest encounters, so she leaves the world having had an incredibly positive impact on countless humans who care for her species even more now because they got to meet Gumnut. And Felix, a 17-year-old Eurasian lynx at the Lake Superior Zoo, has passed away. Felix exceeded the life expectancy of the species, but unfortunately was having a hard time moving around her exhibit, and after being examined, it was realized there wasn't anything that could be done, so the decision was made to euthanize. Felix will be missed. And then that brings us to the rest of our zoo news. So I always preface announcing when a new species arrives at a zoo by saying that I don't announce these often, which I could probably stop doing since I seem to keep announcing them, but I'm sticking with it because it's the exception to the rule every time, even when I do it multiple weeks in a row like I am now. And that's because I really love a species. So yeah, I love this species, so I am happy to announce that the Toledo Zoo has announced that 3 Sichuan Takins have joined the zoo, the first time the species has ever lived there. Now, takin are easily some of my favorite hoofstock, and now you can head to the Toledo Zoo to see why. The Kansas City Zoo has created a very special wetsuit. And no, I don't mean for the staff at the new aquarium there. Instead, I'm talking about a wetsuit that was designed for Bridget, a 37-year-old Gen 2 penguin that calls the zoo home. At her rather advanced age, Bridget is unable to preen herself properly due to age-related spinal issues, so her wetsuit helps her stay warm, dry, and cozy. And the wetsuit works so well as, despite her age, Bridget is still a very active penguin. And this is just the latest example in a long stream of examples of just why I love the Kansas City Zoo so much. It is the number one facility I've not been to that I want to get to, and they constantly impress me, which is impressive given that I do this a lot, you know? So yeah, very cool story. The ZAA recently had their annual conference at the Columbus Zoo, and they announced the accreditation and re-accreditation of multiple facilities. Continuing accreditation are the Dakota Zoo, Jungle Island, Washington Point Zoo, the Fort Worth Zoo, Lion Habitat Ranch, Mill Mountain Zoo, and the Natural Bridge Wildlife Ranch, which is not the zoo in Natural Bridge that has had all kinds of issues lately. Newly accredited facilities include Animal Ark, Safari West, Timvati Wildlife Park, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, Safari North, and the Hattiesburg Zoo. Congrats to all. Zoos Victoria have been using an application known as Moth Tracker to track sightings of bogong moths in Australia. The bogong moth are currently my favorite moth name, at least, by the way, and they are also one of only 2 insect species, along with the monarch butterfly, that is known to migrate thousands of miles to their summer or winter homes, even when they haven't been there before. On top of that, the bogong moth is very important to indigenous Australian cultures, making it an even more special insect. Now, unfortunately, recent studies indicate that the moth is undergoing a major decrease in population, and they haven't really provided a concrete answer as to why yet. So that's why Zoos Victoria is using Moth Tracker to ask citizen scientists to report moth sightings, to hopefully start to get a better understanding of the population and how best to serve and to save it. I love when zoos take on cool conservation projects like this, especially when they incorporate citizen scientists in the process. And speaking of zoo-based conservation efforts, the Toronto Zoo has announced the birth of 13 Vancouver Island marmot pups this year as part of their reintroduction program. These animals will hibernate through the winter at the Tony Barrett Mount Washington Marmot Recovery Center on Vancouver Island before being released into the wild in a protected environment to eventually join the true wild population. The Vancouver Island marmot is an incredibly endangered species. It's the most endangered animal in Canada. And back in 2003, only about 30 remained in the wild. But thanks to conservation efforts, including this reintroduction program at the zoo, the population is now between 200 and 300, with hopefully many more to come from the breeding pairs at the zoo. Beardsley Zoo is having their annual election for mayor of the zoo, with voting currently open. This adorable and wonderful fundraiser is always a lot of fun, and this year, Barry the Red Panda is running for mayor. Now, I think he would do a great job in the position, so I am here to officially endorse Barry the Red Panda for mayor of Beardsley Zoo. I have spent time with Barry, and I genuinely believe he has the right personality for the position, and I think he will do a great job. So please consider going and voting for Barry by checking out the socials of Beardsley Zoo. There's also a direct voting link that I will include in the show notes this week. The Detroit Zoo has announced a $20 million expansion that will cover 7 acres and include stingrays, bamboo sharks, and a 14-foot-high canopy walkway that will allow people a new view of the area around the exhibits. The new area is called Discovery Trails, and the design of the area is based around visitors getting to interact with animals in new ways. A lot of the exhibits will feature hands-on components to truly help connect people to wildlife, and I can't wait to see how the construction develops and eventually, see the new exhibits there. And then last but not least, in zoo news this week, a self-proclaimed animal expert on TikTok recently had a video go viral to the tune of 1 million views or so. And in the video, he claimed that an animal that lives at the Cincinnati Zoo isn't a real animal, but is in fact a hybrid created as a genetic anomaly by the zoo. That animal was, of course, an okapi. And while I assume the video was done in jest, many people actually seemed to believe it, to the point that multiple fact-check sites felt the need to fact-check the video. So, I don't know if I'm more annoyed that the video went viral and people believed it, or if I'm more annoyed that I'm not the one who posted a faux copy video and had it go viral. This has been my dumb joke for years now, and honestly, it never occurred to me to try and turn it into a thing outside of our community. Of course, I also wouldn't want to have misled people, but I do like to think that my take on it, which is not that it's some weird genetic thing done by a zoo, but that they're electronic and made by Disney, would have been, people would have been less inclined to actually believe my dumb joke. But honestly, I don't know. Maybe as a conservation educator, I shouldn't be out there spreading falsehoods to the general public. To all of you that listen, we can have fun, and I get that, and that's why you know that okapis are not real. They were created by Disney. I don't care. Even my own experience meeting one has faded to the background. Faux copy forever.
Stereotypical animal podcast theme song. Here to bring you to conservation news.
All right, so we have a few interesting stories about rhino conservation this week, and we're going to start with a really good one. The rhino population in northern India has grown 5-fold as poaching has dropped 86% since 2016. In total, the population has grown from 600 in the 1960s to over 3,000 rhinos today, which is credited to the conservation efforts made in country. The population increase since 2016 in particular is credited to anti-poaching measures taking off and having a huge effect. Now, this is a huge success for rhino conservation, and that makes me really happy, but there is something that makes me chuckle with this story. I feel like every single story I do about rhino conservation has insane numbers. It's never like rhinos in Area A have seen a 3% population increase, or 2 more rhinos were born in place B than were born there in the 2 years previously, which is what so much of the conservation news stories I share in general look like. It's a long game and a slow process. But instead, with rhinos, it's always huge swings, both the good and the bad. In this case, the population has grown 5-fold in 8 years. That's amazing, especially for megafauna. And then other times it's been stuff like poaching has doubled in 3 years or whatever. It's always huge numbers. And I point that out partially just because I'm a nerd and I find it to be an interesting trend, but also because I wonder if there is a reason for that. Is rhino conservation done differently, or is the battle between the good guys and the bad guys here so much more drastic with that species than with others? I don't have the answer, but I'm curious if any of you listening have thoughts on it, and if I ever have any free time, I might even try to look into it further. But we all know how much free time I have. But yeah, that's not all for rhino conservation this week. And this is another one that if anyone has any thoughts on, I'm curious to hear them. A San Francisco-based startup named Pembient is using biotechnology to use 3D printers to create fake rhino horns that match real ones in their genetic makeup. The goal of the company is to flood the Chinese market with these fake horns, as that market is believed to be the main reason rhino poaching is still so prevalent today. The hope is that selling these rhino horns at a greatly reduced rate, about 1/8 of the price of actual horns, will lead to the market for actual horns cratering in China, making poaching and importing less profitable. It's an interesting concept, but I do have some concerns about it. Especially after learning that the company is even planning on introducing a beer in China made with synthetic rhino horn. I'm not entirely sure what the plan is with the beer here, but I assume it's to show that their synthetic rhino horn is as good as regular horns, I guess. So, on one hand, I think the first part of the plan is interesting. Flooding the market with synthetic rhino horn could arguably tank the market price of the true thing. But if you're selling it at a reduced rate, then won't it be easy for connoisseurs to tell the fake rhino from the real rhino because of the huge price discrepancy? That could actually lead to real rhino horn being seen as even more of a status symbol, which could drive the price of the real thing up. Then, on top of that, there is the concern about making synthetic rhino horn more accessible to a larger population because of the lower price, which could then get those people interested in pursuing the real thing once they get a taste of the cheaper synthetic version. Kind of the whole, hey kid, the first hit's free tactic that you hear about from drug dealers. And then when they talk about using the synthetic horns in a beer they're going to make, it makes me think that it could illustrate to people that their synthetic horns are every bit as good as the ones found on rhinos. But at the end of the day, doesn't that just prove, and I'm putting that in quotation marks here, that rhino horn actually does have the benefits that have been disproven, but that many people who buy into traditional medicine still believe in? Now, I admit that I don't know a lot about the people who are into rhino horns or how that specific market works, but this seems like a plan that has far more potential negative consequences than positive ones at first glance to me. I mean, yeah, if you can truly get people to switch completely from real rhino horns to synthetic ones, then yeah, that's great. But like, it's not like McDonald's is mostly selling Impossible burgers now. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's not a ton of reason to believe that people will buy into the synthetic thing. So I don't know. It's interesting. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And then the final story for conservation news this week. I actually debated whether to put this one in conservation news or other news, but I think it's actually a good way to message people about an important conservation thing. So here it is. We often talk about how feeding wildlife is a really, really bad idea, and a lot of non-releasable animals get that way because people feed them, and then they become what are known as nuisance animals, where they have to be removed from the wild to either live in human care or be euthanized. Now, while most of the messaging focuses on the animals, now there is a great anecdote you can share about why it can be bad for the human that does the feeding as well. A woman in Washington state has been feeding a family of 6 raccoons for years, but they recently decided to bring friends. Lots of friends. Somewhere around 100 raccoons started showing up at her house, acting aggressive and seeking food. And we're not talking about a one-time visit. The mob was showing up in different numbers at all times, day and night, day after day. The woman in question reached out to authorities who basically said there was nothing they could do but told her to stop feeding the raccoons. And fortunately for her, this seems to be working as the number of raccoons has just started to shrink, as far as like the ones hanging about, because a lot were just hanging about. This was just their new happy place. So I'm glad it worked out this way and nothing bad happened to the raccoons. And I suppose I'm glad nothing happened to the woman either. But just a great reminder that you shouldn't feed wildlife. And if you have friends who are like, well, I like seeing the squirrels be happy or whatever, just tell them about the 100 raccoons ransacking a woman's home. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but just tell them about the 100 raccoons ransacking the woman's home. They're probably not going to fact check you in the moment. And that brings us to... In other news, we often talk about how humans coming up with creative ways to live with wildlife is super important to eliminating, or at least minimizing, human-animal conflict. Well, a man in Vancouver has come up with a particularly interesting idea that's working well for him. After a local bear started smashing a hole into his fence, he installed a bear-sized doggy door. It's large enough for a bear, but heavy enough to keep other wildlife out of his yard. The bear doesn't cause any issues in the yard, so it's a great way for them to coexist without him having to keep replacing his fence or get the bear removed to save his fence. A very cool, very tolerant idea that I absolutely love. And then last but not least, in other news, the Horseman Trust in South Wales, which is an organization dedicated to saving vultures through innovation and research, has done some research and came up with an innovative way to save a vulture. So I'd say they're nailing their mission statement. A 28-year-old Eurasian black vulture named Bernard has become the first ever vulture to receive stem cell treatment for arthritis. The stem cells used were Bernard's own, and they were expanded through culturing, eventually enabling the team doing the work to deliver over 7 million high-quality stem cells to the bird. This is an absolutely incredible procedure that will not only help Bernard feel better, but also can be used for other birds now. So that is just really, really special. Love that story so much. Yay, Bernard!
Animal, animal, animal holidays. Animal, animal, animal holidays.
And that brings us to our animal holidays for the week. It is October, which is Croctober, Tamara Month, Bat Appreciation Month, Squirrel Awareness Month, and Adopt a Shelter Dog Month. And yes, I still tell every single squirrel that I see, which is a lot of them, that I am aware of them during the month of October. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. As far as our individual days, the 25th is World Lemur Day. The 26th is both National Mule Day and National Hug a Sheep Day. The 27th is National Black Cat Day. The 29th is National Sea Slug Day and National Cat Day, which makes sense since they are such similar animals. And then the 30th is International Ghost Shark Day, which makes sense since the 31st is Halloween and ghosts are spooky. And those are your animal holidays for the week. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. I'd also like to remind y'all that you can support the pod for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. And you can also support Zoo News simply by tagging me in or sending me any cool Zoo News-worthy stories that you see. Tag me on socials at Rossifari, at RossifariPod on the TikTok machine, or email them to me, rossifaripod@gmail.com, and I'll say your name at the end of the episode, whether I use them or not, like this. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who contributed to this week's episode, including Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Dr. Laura Shank, Ali Malensky, Kay Malensky,
The Molenskys.
Crystal Chapman, Jay Meredith, Ann Yoshioka, Holly Page, Nikki Morley, Melissa Reed, Elizabeth Charles, Sam Evans, Strix, who is the Madonna of the Rossifari world. One name, super funky, it's all you need. Lizard Dunleavy, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Taylor Isaac Gray, Dylan Hoy, and Miles Rossi. I love when Miles contributes. He gets so excited. It's so cute. So thank you, everyone, for contributing. We'll be back here on Tuesday with a brand new episode from, I believe, a brand new to the pod facility. And don't forget to make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss that and that you don't miss any Friday Zoo News episode. And most of all, that you don't miss me reminding y'all that the words news and credits backwards are Snyder Kiss when. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. And then they become what are known as nuance. It's nuisance.